Evelyn's fingers trembled as she reached for the doorknob, her heart pounding so fiercely she could feel it in her throat. The cool metal beneath her palm seemed to burn, a stark reminder of the threshold she was about to cross, both literally and figuratively. With a deep breath, she turned the handle and stepped into the dimly lit study. Lucas sat behind his imposing mahogany desk, his silver-streaked hair catching the warm glow of the desk lamp. At 52, he carried an air of authority that both intimidated and attracted Evelyn. His piercing blue eyes lifted from the stack of papers before him, softening as they met her gaze. "Evelyn," he said, his deep voice sending a shiver down her spine. "I wasn't expecting you this evening." She swallowed hard, willing her voice not to betray her nerves. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Blackwood. I needed to speak with you." Lucas leaned back in his chair, a small frown creasing his brow. "Is everything all right? You seem troubled." Evelyn, at 28, had been working as Lucas's personal assistant for just over a year. She'd taken the job fresh out of her MBA program, eager to learn from one of the most respected CEOs in the tech industry. What she hadn't anticipated was the magnetic pull she'd feel towards her employer, a man nearly twice her age and very much married. "I've been thinking about our conversation from last week," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "About the project in Singapore." Lucas nodded slowly, his expression guarded. "Yes, I remember. You had some concerns about the ethical implications of the data collection methods." Evelyn took a step closer to the desk, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I did more research, Mr. Blackwood. The potential for abuse is even greater than we initially thought. I don't think I can be part of this." A heavy silence fell between them. Lucas stood, circling around the desk until he was standing just inches from Evelyn. She could smell his cologne, a heady mix of sandalwood and something uniquely him. It made her dizzy. "Evelyn," he said softly, reaching out to touch her arm, "I understand your concerns, but you have to see the bigger picture. This project could revolutionize the way we approach healthcare in developing nations. The good we could do far outweighs the potential risks." She looked up at him, her green eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "But at what cost, Lucas? We'd be violating people's privacy, potentially putting vulnerable populations at risk. How can we justify that?" The use of his first name hung in the air between them, an intimacy neither had dared to breach before this moment. Lucas's hand tightened slightly on her arm, and Evelyn felt a jolt of electricity course through her body. "Sometimes," he murmured, "we have to make difficult choices for the greater good. It's not always black and white, Evelyn. You'll learn that as you gain more experience in this industry." Evelyn shook her head, taking a step back. "No, I can't accept that. There has to be another way, a better way. We can't just..." Her words were cut off as Lucas closed the distance between them, his lips crashing against hers with an urgency that took her breath away. For a moment Evelyn froze, her mind reeling from the sudden turn of events. But then, as if a dam had burst, she found herself responding with equal fervor, her hands reaching up to tangle in his hair. The kiss was everything she had imagined and more, passionate, desperate, and tinged with the knowledge that it was utterly forbidden. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Evelyn felt as though the world had shifted on its axis. Lucas rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I shouldn't have done that. But God help me, Evelyn, I've wanted to for so long." Evelyn's mind raced, her body still thrumming with desire. This was wrong on so many levels. He was her boss, he was married, and there was a significant age gap between them. And yet, she couldn't deny the connection she felt, the way her very soul seemed to recognize his. "Lucas," she breathed, her voice trembling. "We can't. This isn't right." He pulled back slightly, cupping her face in his hands. "I know. Believe me, I know. But tell me you don't feel this too, Evelyn. Tell me I'm alone in this, and I'll never speak of it again." She wanted to lie, to push him away and run from the room, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, her eyes closing as she savored the warmth of his hands on her skin. "I can't tell you that," she admitted, her voice barely audible, "because I do feel it. And it terrifies me." Lucas brushed his thumb across her cheek, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "What do we do now?" he asked, the vulnerability in his voice so at odds with the powerful CEO she was used to seeing. Evelyn took a shaky breath, forcing herself to step back and create some distance between them. "I don't know. But we can't. This can't happen again. You're married, Lucas. And you're my boss. There are 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea." He nodded, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You're right, of course. I'm sorry, Evelyn. I never meant to put you in this position. Perhaps it would be best if you transferred to another department." The thought of not seeing Lucas every day sent a sharp pain through Evelyn's chest, but she knew he was right. "Maybe that would be for the best," she agreed softly. As she turned to leave, Lucas called out to her. "Evelyn? About the Singapore project. A look into alternative methods. You're right, we need to find a better way." She gave him a small, sad smile. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Good night." As the door closed behind her, Evelyn leaned against the wall, her legs suddenly weak. She had come to Lucas's office tonight, prepared to resign if he wouldn't reconsider the project. Instead, she had opened Pandora's box, unleashing feelings that threatened to consume them both. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a tumultuous journey that would test her morals, her heart, and the very foundations of everything she believed in. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen glances and carefully maintained distance. Evelyn had been reassigned to the marketing department, working under Caroline Holbrook, a stern woman in her early 60s who seemed to take an instant dislike to her. The work was challenging, but Evelyn found herself distracted, her mind constantly drifting back to that night in Lucas's study. She threw herself into her new role, determined to prove her worth and push thoughts of Lucas from her mind. But late at night, when the city lights twinkled outside her apartment window, she couldn't help but replay their kiss over and over again. It was on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, nearly a month after that fateful night, that Evelyn found herself face to face with Lucas once more. She had stayed late to finish a presentation, the office nearly deserted as the clock ticked past 7. As she made her way to the elevator, arms laden with files, she quite literally ran into him. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking where I was." Evelyn's apology died on her lips as she realized who she had collided with. "Mr. Blackwood." Lucas steadied her with a hand on her elbow, his touch sending sparks through her even through the fabric of her blazer. "Evelyn," he said softly, his eyes drinking her in as if he was a man dying of thirst. "Working late?" She nodded, suddenly acutely aware of how close they were standing. "Yes, I have a presentation for Mrs. Holbrook tomorrow morning. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect." A small smile played at the corners of Lucas's lips. "I'm sure it will be. Your work is always exceptional." Evelyn felt a blush creep up her neck at his praise. "Thank you. I should go. It's getting late." She made to move past him, but Lucas's hand on her arm stopped her. "Evelyn, wait. Please." She turned back to him, her heart pounding. "Lucas, we can't do this. We agreed." "I know what we agreed," he said, his voice low and urgent. "But I can't stop thinking about you. About us. Tell me you don't lie awake at night wondering what could have been." Evelyn closed her eyes, willing herself to be strong. "It doesn't matter what I think or feel. You're married, Lucas. You have responsibilities, a life that I have no place in." His grip on her arm tightened slightly. "My marriage has been over for years, Evelyn. Sarah and I, we're little more than roommates at this point, staying together for the sake of appearances, for the company." She shook her head, taking a step back. "That doesn't make this right. I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood, but I have to go." As she hurried towards the elevator, she could feel Lucas's eyes on her, burning with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. The next morning, Evelyn arrived at work early, determined to nail her presentation and prove to Caroline that she deserved her place in the department. As she set up the conference room, she tried to push thoughts of Lucas from her mind, focusing instead on the charts and graphs before her. The presentation went well, with Caroline even offering a rare word of praise. As Evelyn gathered her materials, feeling a sense of accomplishment, her phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown number. Meet me at the Bluebird Cafe at 7 p.m. Please. We need to talk." Evelyn's heart raced as she read the message. She knew she should ignore it, delete it and pretend she never saw it. But even as she thought this, her fingers were already typing out a response. Evelyn, I'll be there. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anticipation and dread. As 7 p.m. approached, Evelyn found herself standing outside the Bluebird Cafe, a small, dimly lit establishment tucked away on a quiet side street. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever was about to happen, and pushed open the door. Lucas was already there, seated in a secluded booth at the back of the cafe. He stood as she approached, his eyes never leaving her face. Evelyn, he said softly, thank you for coming. She slid into the booth across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. What did you want to talk about, Mr. Blackwood? He winced slightly at her formal tone. Please call me Lucas. At least when we're alone. Evelyn nodded, her throat suddenly dry. A waitress appeared, and they both ordered coffee, neither quite ready to face this conversation without some form of liquid courage. Once they were alone again, Lucas leaned forward, his voice low and intense. I've been thinking about what you said about the Singapore project. You were right, Evelyn. I've spent the past month reevaluating our approach, and I think I've found a way to achieve our goals without compromising our ethics. Evelyn's eyebrows rose in surprise. This was not what she had been expecting. That's wonderful, Lucas. I'm glad you were able to find a solution. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. It's all thanks to you, Evelyn. Your passion, your integrity. It made me see things differently. You've changed me in ways I never expected. She felt her cheeks grow warm at his words, her heart racing at his touch. Lucas, I know what you're going to say, he interrupted gently. That this is wrong, that we can't pursue whatever this is between us. But Evelyn, I can't ignore my feelings anymore. I'm falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and danger. Evelyn felt as though she was standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that her next move would change everything. Lucas, she whispered, her voice trembling. I have feelings for you too, but we can't act on them. It's not just about your marriage or our working relationship. There's so much at stake here. He squeezed her hand, his blue eyes intense. I know. Believe me, I've thought of nothing else for weeks. But Evelyn, what if we're meant to be together? What if this is our one chance at true happiness? She shook her head, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. And what about Sarah? Your children? The company? We can't just throw all of that away on a whim. Lucas sighed, running his free hand through his hair. It wouldn't be on a whim. Sarah and I have been unhappy for years. We've talked about divorce before, but always put it off for one reason or another. As for the company, well, it might be time for me to step down anyway. Let someone younger with fresh ideas take the reins. Evelyn's mind reeled at his words. Was he really considering appending his entire life for her? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Lucas, she said softly, I can't ask you to do all that for me. It's too much. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. You're not asking, Evelyn. I'm offering, because I believe what we have is worth fighting for. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, her resolve crumbling in the face of his devotion. I'm scared, she admitted. What if we're making a huge mistake? Lucas stood, moving to sit beside her in the booth. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. The only mistake would be not giving this a chance. I know it won't be easy, but I promise you, Evelyn, I will do everything in my power to make this work. And then he was kissing her softly at first, then with increasing passion. Evelyn melted into him, all her doubts and fears fading away in the warmth of his embrace. For a moment it was just the two of them, lost in a world of their own making. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and flushed, Evelyn knew there was no going back. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Okay, she whispered, a small smile playing at her lips. Let's do this. Lucas beamed at her, his eyes shining with joy and love. Together? He asked, lacing his fingers through hers. Evelyn nodded, her heart full to bursting. Together. As they left the cafe, hand in hand, neither of them noticed the figure watching from across the street. Sarah Blackwood lowered her phone, her hands shaking as she stared at the photo she had just taken of her husband kissing his young assistant. With tears in her eyes and rage in her heart, Sarah made a decision that would set in motion a chain of events that would test Lucas and Evelyn's love in ways they could never have imagined. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of secret meetings and stolen moments. Lucas and Evelyn were careful, always meeting in out-of-the-way places, never showing any sign of their relationship at work. But despite their caution, there was a new lightness to both of them that was hard to miss. Caroline Holbrook noticed the change in Evelyn almost immediately. The young woman seemed more confident, more focused, and there was a glow about her that hadn't been there before. Caroline's eyes narrowed as she watched Evelyn laughing with a colleague by the water cooler. Something was different, and Caroline was determined to find out what it was. Meanwhile, Lucas had begun the delicate process of broaching the subject of divorce with Sarah. He had expected anger, tears, perhaps even bargaining. What he hadn't anticipated was the cold, calculating look in his wife's eyes as he stumbled through his prepared speech. "I see," Sarah said calmly, setting down her wine glass with a soft clink. "And does this sudden desire for a divorce have anything to do with your pretty young assistant?" Lucas felt the blood drain from his face. "What are you talking about?" Sarah's lips curved into a humorless smile. "Please, Lucas, don't insult my intelligence. I've known about your little affair for weeks. Did you really think you could keep it a secret?" He slumped back in his chair, his mind racing. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Evelyn and you what, Lucas?" Sarah's voice was sharp, cutting through his fumbling explanation. "You fell in love? You couldn't help yourself? Save your excuses." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, his composure crumbling. "It's not just an affair, Sarah. What Evelyn and I have. It's real. I know this isn't fair to you and I'm sorry for that. But I can't pretend anymore." Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Oh, it's real, is it? Well, let me tell you something, Lucas. What's real is the prenuptial agreement you signed. What's real is the scandal this will cause when it gets out. What's real is the damage this will do to the company, to our children, to everything we've built." Her words hit Lucas like a physical blow. He had known this wouldn't be easy, but facing the reality of it was more daunting than he had imagined. "Sarah, please. We can handle this discreetly. For the sake of the kids, if nothing else." A cold laugh escaped Sarah's lips. "Discreetly? Like how you've been so discreet with your little trysts. No, Lucas. You don't get to dictate the terms here. You want a divorce? Fine. But it'll be on my terms, and believe me, you won't like them." With that, she stormed out of the room, leaving Lucas alone with the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. Across town, Evelyn was having dinner with her best friend, Mia. The two had known each other since college, and Mia was the only person Evelyn had confided in about her relationship with Lucas. "I still can't believe you're actually doing this, an affair with your married boss? It's like something out of a trashy novel." Evelyn flinched at the word affair. "It's not like that, Mia. Lucas and I. It's more than just a fling. He's leaving his wife. We're going to be together properly." Mia's eyebrows shot up. "He's leaving his wife? Do you hear yourself? Men like that, they always say they'll leave their wives. But when it comes down to it, Lucas is different," Evelyn insisted, though a seed of doubt had been planted. "He loves me. He's willing to risk everything for us." Mia reached across the table, squeezing Evelyn's hand. "I hope you're right, honey. I really do. But please be careful. I don't want to see you get hurt." As Evelyn made her way home that night, Mia's words echoed in her mind. She knew people would judge her, would see her as the young homewrecker who seduced her boss. But they didn't understand. What she and Lucas had was real, wasn't it? Her phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. "Can you meet me? It's important." 20 minutes later, Evelyn found herself in a quiet park, sitting beside Lucas on a bench overlooking a small pond. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting everything in a silvery glow. "I told Sarah," Lucas said without preamble. "About us. About the divorce." Evelyn's heart raced. How did she take it? Lucas let out a humorless laugh. "About as well as you'd expect. She knows about us, Evelyn. She's known for weeks." A cold dread settled in Evelyn's stomach. Oh God. Lucas, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. He turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. No, don't say that. This isn't your fault. If anything, it's mine. I'm the one who made vows to Sarah. I'm the one who broke them. Evelyn leaned into his touch, tears prickling at her eyes. What do we do now? Lucas sighed, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. Sarah's not going to make this easy. She's threatening to go public, to drag both of us through the mud. The board. They might force me to step down if this gets out. The reality of their situation came crashing down on Evelyn. This wasn't just about them anymore. Their actions had consequences that reached far beyond their own lives. Maybe, Evelyn began, her voice trembling. Maybe we should end this, before anyone else gets hurt. Lucas's grip on her tightened. No, Evelyn, look at me. I love you. Whatever happens, whatever we have to face, we'll do it together. I'm not giving up on us. As he pulled her into a fierce kiss, Evelyn wanted desperately to believe him. But a nagging voice in the back of her mind whispered that this was only the beginning of their troubles. The next morning, Evelyn arrived at work to find the office in an uproar. Whispers followed her as she made her way to her desk, and she could feel the weight of judgmental stares on her back. Caroline Holbrook was waiting for her, a stern expression on her face. Ms. Winters, my office. Now. With a sinking feeling in her stomach, Evelyn followed Caroline into her office. The older woman closed the door behind them, her lips pressed into a thin line. I assume you know why I've called you in here, Caroline began, her voice cold. Evelyn swallowed hard. Mrs. Holbrook, I can explain. Save it, Caroline cut her off. I don't need to hear the sordid details. What I need is for you to understand the gravity of your actions. Do you have any idea of the damage you've caused? Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes. I never meant for any of this to happen. Lucas and I, we love each other. Caroline's expression softened slightly, a flicker of sympathy crossing her face. Oh, you poor naive girl. Men like Lucas Blackwood don't leave their wives for their young assistants. They use them, discard them, and move on to the next pretty face. You're wrong, Evelyn insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Lucas is different. Caroline shook her head. For your sake, I hope you're right. But regardless of your personal feelings, your actions have put this company in a precarious position. The board is meeting as we speak to discuss how to handle this situation. Evelyn's heart sank. Am I being fired? That remains to be seen, Caroline replied. For now, you're suspended pending a full investigation. I suggest you use this time to really think about the choices you've made, Ms. Winters. As Evelyn left Caroline's office, her world spinning, she nearly collided with a tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. Ah, you must be Evelyn, the man said, his voice smooth as silk. I'm Jonathan Reeves from the board of directors. I wonder if I might have a word with you. Evelyn nodded numbly, following Jonathan into an empty conference room. As the door closed behind them, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into the lion's den. Jonathan gestured for her to sit, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Ms. Winters, I'm sure you're aware of the delicate situation we find ourselves in. The board is very concerned about the potential fallout from your relationship with Mr. Blackwood. Evelyn's hands twisted in her lap. I understand, Mr. Reeves. I never meant for any of this to happen. If there's anything I can do to make this right. As a matter of fact, Jonathan leaned forward, his voice lowering conspiratorially, there is something you can do. Something that would benefit both you and the company. A glimmer of hope sparked in Evelyn's chest. What is it? Jonathan's smile widened, reminding Evelyn of a shark circling its prey. It's quite simple, really. We need you to sign a non-disclosure agreement and quietly resign from your position. In return, we'll provide you with a generous severance package and a glowing letter of recommendation. Evelyn felt as though the air had been sucked from her lungs. You want me to leave? But what about Lucas? Mr. Blackwood's future with the company is uncertain at this point, Jonathan replied smoothly. But you, Ms. Winters, have an opportunity here. A chance to walk away from this mess with your reputation intact and your future bright. I strongly suggest you take it. As Jonathan slid a stack of papers across the table, Evelyn felt her world crumbling around her. She had known there would be consequences, but this felt like the end of everything she had dreamed of. With shaking hands, she reached for the pen Jonathan offered. As she poised it above the signature line, a battle raged within her. Sign and she could walk away from all of this. Refuse and she risked losing everything. Her career, her reputation, and possibly even Lucas. The choice she made in that moment would shape the course of her life forever.